Ancient engineering marvels. You stand beside a stone so perfectly cut it fits its neighbor without a gap. Your hand finds no cement, only a seam that is almost invisible. These walls still hold, because people thousands of years ago solved problems with clever methods we are only now starting to copy. Here is what is really happening. At Giza, workers used copper tools, pounding stones, and sand to shape granite. They dragged blocks on sledges and moved them on the Nile during floods. A papyrus logbook discovered in recent years even records teams ferrying stone from one quarry to another. The secret was not magic. It was logistics, careful planning, and small, useful tricks that cut costs and time. Across the world, the Indus cities showed us another trick. Houses had private wells and covered drains running under streets. Urban planners built baths and reservoirs that kept water moving and cities clean. For a billionaire thinking about sustainability, those old solutions are blueprints for low-cost, resilient design. You can build modern systems that use less energy and last longer by copying their simple rules. Roman concrete is the third old idea that still pays off. Romans mixed volcanic ash with lime and rubble, and made a material that grows stronger with seawater. Modern labs found rare minerals that form over time and bind the mix. That means lower carbon alternatives are possible if we learn how they mixed ingredients and where they sourced materials. But the trick you want to hear most is hidden in plain sight. The very way these projects were organized gave rulers control over labor, information, and supply. And that control is a secret billionaires already pay fortunes to recreate. Learn that structure, and you find the leverage modern power buys. The hidden advantage was organizational more than technical. Ancient projects were massive coordination problems solved with records people trusted. Scribes logged shipments, foremen tracked teams. Temples and palaces acted like banks and think tanks. That meant rulers did not just own materials. They owned the flow of labor, information, and timing. Here is a concrete example. The Merer logbook records men moving limestone along the Nile. It names crews and dates. That is supply chain intelligence. For a modern founder, the lesson is simple. Control the route. Control the timetable. Control the data. Those three things cut waste and create monopoly, like advantages that compound over time. Now think of Roman concrete again. The material itself was a secret for centuries, but so was the trade in raw ingredients and the skilled labor that mixed them. The Romans did not just know a formula. They had supply lines to volcanic ash and skilled workshops. When those channels break, the knowledge fades. Billionaires understand that. They buy mines, exclusive patents, or talent pipelines so that competitors cannot replicate their advantages. Finally, consider the Indus water systems. They were not glamorous. They were drains, wells, and baths. Yet they made cities healthier and more productive. A healthy city produces tax revenue, recruits, and artisans. For someone who wants scale, a reliable base of operations is as valuable as any new technology. So, when you hear about ancient engineering marvels, do not only admire the stones. Ask who organized the work. Ask where the materials came from. Ask which institutions kept the knowledge alive. Those are the levers that turn inventions into empires, lost trade routes. You stand at the mouth of a city carved from red rock, and you hear the call of merchants who once moved spices, silk, and incense through deserts and mountains. Petra was not just beautiful. It was a choke point. Control that narrow pass, and you control the tolls the caravans paid. That is how fortunes were built. Archaeology gives us the receipts. Chinese silk shows up in Roman graves. Roman glass turns up in Central Asian tombs. Caravanserais, oasis towns, and coin hoards map a web of buyers, sellers, and middlemen. The Silk Road was less a single road and more a living network that moved goods and ideas. The people who controlled it could choose which cities thrived and which withered. Then there is the incense route. Frankincense and myrrh came from southern Arabia. They were used in temples from Alexandria to Rome. The Nabateans turned a trade in resin into a kingdom by building water systems and taxing caravans. That taxed income paid for rock-cut facades and a city that drew diplomats as well as traders. Think about Ubar. For centuries it was a story. Then, satellite imagery and on-the-ground digs found a ruined fortress and caravan shelter in the empty quarter. The lesson for modern wealth creators is obvious. Hidden routes and forgotten hubs become advantages when others ignore them. A billionaire who invests in the road, the port, or the warehouse gains the option to levy control or to move faster than rivals. Finally, consider the Amber Road. Northern resin traveled down to Mediterranean markets and bought status and religion. Long supply chains create power. Which means the real secret is not the commodity itself. It is the control of distribution, the middlemen, the nodes where prices are set, hidden treasures and hoards. You are in a dim tomb, and the lamplight hits gold so bright it looks alive. Howard Carter first opened that door in 1922 and found more than relics. He found an archive of elite life. Over 5,000 artifacts told a story of how a ruler stored status for eternity. Here is what is really happening. Tutankhamun was not just buried with jewelry. He was buried with a plan for afterlife influence. Those grave goods functioned as insurance against looters and chaos. They also preserved craftsmanship and trade links for centuries. Archaeologists used those objects like accounting ledgers to read who had access to what wealth and why. Now consider the Staffordshire hoard, discovered in 2009. Over 3,500 pieces, mostly Marshall fittings, were hidden in the ground. They were not coins. They were status statements, and possibly war booty hidden to remove power from rivals. That practice looks less like saving and more like a ritual of transfer and protection. Then there is the legend of the Langanates Mountains, where Inca flight supposedly left a mountain of gold. No confirmed find exists, which makes the story itself valuable. Myths create hunts and markets. For billionaires, the lesson is practical. Concentrated assets survive collapse only if properly concealed or legitimized. Diversification is ancient. Safe houses and trusted networks are ancient. What would you hide if your empire fell tomorrow? And who would you trust with the map? A final perspective is risk and legitimacy. Some hoards were hidden to survive conquest. Others were hidden as offerings to gods. Both strategies teach a billionaire lesson. You can hide assets in physical vaults and secret accounts, or you can bury value in institutions that survive reputational storms like temples or museums. There is also timing. Some caches were recovered within a generation, others lay lost for centuries. That difference shows the value of redundancy. Spread your bets across places people care about and places they cannot reach. Use public legitimacy to protect private value. Donors who fund museums buy both legacy and security. That strategy turns treasure into influence. Now think about the social cost. When elites stash wealth, they may preserve culture. They may also starve communities. Who gets to bury wealth, and who is forced to dig for scraps later? Ancient hoards force a modern question about responsibility and power. From a technical angle, there are lessons too. Cataloging matters. Trusted records kept ownership alive. Networked guardianship beat lone secret keepers. That explains why trusts and family offices persist. So if you are building a modern empire, do you choose secrecy, isolation, legitimacy, or public legacy? Which protects your assets from collapse, and which protects your name from the future court of history? The answer shapes how you build and how future archaeologists will read your remains. Ancient banking and financial systems. You lift a clay tablet, and the grooves are a ledger. It lists a loan, a witness, and a promise to pay back grain or silver. Those tablets are the oldest bank statements in history. Here is what is really happening. In Mesopotamia, temples and palaces acted like banks. Farmers borrowed seed before planting. Merchants financed caravans. The tablets recorded who owed what and who had collateral. Some contracts even spelled out interest at rates that sound high today, yet were standard then. That record-keeping created trust. Trust allowed credit. Credit let rulers move armies, build monuments, and fund projects without hoarding all the metal themselves. The Code of Hammurabi reinforced those contracts with laws. That legal backing turned private IOUs into stable instruments. Now consider Roman practice. Professional bankers worked in public spaces and handled deposits payments and currency exchange. They created instruments that moved wealth across borders. What mattered was not only metal in a vault, it was the network that could transfer claims quickly. For a billionaire, the lesson is clear. Control credit. Control the ledger. The person or institution that records transactions can shape markets. Owning the data and the settlement network gives leverage that trumps a pile of gold. Different perspectives matter. A state can issue stability at scale. A private network can move faster with less oversight. Which model suits your strategy depends on whether you want scale or secrecy, who keeps your records, and who enforces your contracts. Who decides which debts are forgiven and which are enforced? Those are the invisible levers of wealth. Secret societies and elite power structures. You step into a carved chamber where markings repeat like a code, and you feel that the space belonged to a few chosen people. That feeling is the point. Symbols and private places make power visible to members and invisible to outsiders. Archaeologists find elite burial chambers with restricted goods and inscriptions that list titles and relations. They find carved symbols in public buildings that mark lineage or guild membership. Those marks were social currency. If you showed the right sign, you entered a network of favors and access. Here is the lesson. Wealth is not only money, wealth is access. The elites built exclusive spaces and rituals so trust could travel inside the group. That trust lowered transaction costs inside the circle. It created a private marketplace where favors and information moved faster and with less leak. From one perspective, this is natural. Groups need cohesion and rules. From another perspective, exclusive structures reinforce inequality. For billionaires, the tool is clear. Create membership, build rituals and symbols that signal trust, fund institutions that act as gatekeepers. That converts private wealth into influence that outlasts a single generation. Think of 3 practical moves. 1. Design exclusive places that bind your network. 2. Use symbolic gestures that communicate reliability without broadcasting secrets. 3. Institutionalize your network with foundations or endowments so access becomes a legacy. Who gets to be inside and who is left out? That choice shapes not only profit, but history. You have seen the carved marks and secret rooms. Now imagine the meeting after the ritual. Elites exchanged favors in rooms that closed like shells. Those rituals built trust that money alone could not buy. The first modern move is membership design. Create a private space that binds people. It can be a club, a retreat, or a tiny foundation. The point is not secrecy for its own sake. The point is shared identity and predictable support. That lowers friction for big deals. The second move is symbolic signaling. Ancient elites used symbols carved into stone. Today, branding and curated philanthropy play the same role. A plaque and endowed chair, a named institute tells the world who belongs and who can be trusted. Those signals open doors that money alone cannot pry open. The third move is institutionalization. Ancient networks became temples or lineage houses that lasted generations. Modern billionaires build family offices, trusts, and foundations that formalize access and transfer power across time. That is how influence survives market crashes and regime changes. There is a darker side. Exclusive networks can freeze opportunity and hide harm. They can shelter tax avoidance or influence that bends rules. Archaeology shows the outcome. When access concentrates, so does resentment and instability. So ask yourself a hard question. Will you build a circle that protects only your wealth, or will you build institutions that balance power with public purpose? Which path secures legacy, and which creates enemies across centuries, ancient knowledge of natural resources? You crouch at the mouth of a mine and pick up a dark stone flecked with blue that once crossed continents and paid for palaces. That rock is lapis lazuli, and its journey reveals how raw materials become empires. Here is what is really happening. In Egypt, gold was more than ornament. It was sacred capital. Kings sent state missions to Nubia and to desert mines. Those expeditions were logistical feats that required control of labor transport and security. That control produced concentrated wealth. In ancient Greece, the Laurian silver mines funded fleets and changed history. A city that controlled a mine could field navies and decide wars. Ownership of mines was strategic power, not mere resource extraction. In Afghanistan, miners dug lapis in remote highlands, and traders moved the pigment to royal workshops in cities. The value came not only from the stone, but from the networks that transported it, and the artisans who turned it into status. Provenance kept demand high. From a billionaire perspective, the lessons are clear. Secure sources before markets rise. Vertical integration beats spot purchases. Control processing and brand provenance to capture more value, and invest in logistics, because remote resources are worthless without routes. There are also costs to weigh. Ancient mining left scars and forced labor. Modern extraction faces environmental law, reputational risk, and political turnover. Which risks are you willing to accept, and which can you transfer to partners? If you could own one resource today, would you buy the mine, the port, or the brand that turns it into luxury? Which choice scales profit, and which invites conflict? The last lesson is risk management. In ancient gold fields, workers left graffiti-carved prayers and lists of rations. Those marks tell archaeologists the cost of extraction. Cost is not only labor, it is water, soil, and social order. For a modern billionaire, the first move is legal control. Secure long-term concessions with clear title and local agreements. Old mines became useless when rights changed. The next move is processing. Move up the value chain by owning refineries, smelters, or branded workshops. The Romans and Nabateans did not only extract, they refined and sold. Third move is provenance and narrative. Lapis, from a named mine, commanded premium because kings valued origin. Build a brand story that proves where your material came from and who benefited along the way. That sells to wealthy buyers and reduces reputational risk. Fourth move is partnerships. Ancient expeditions needed escorts and local guides. Today, you need community deals and legal hedges. Invest in local infrastructure and pay fair wages. That lowers the chance of shutdowns and protest. Fifth move is diversification. Mines can dry up, prices can collapse, and technologies can replace materials. Hold assets that move with markets. Use financial instruments to hedge production risk. There is also moral risk. Extraction can pollute and displace people. Archaeology shows long-term scars and lost landscapes. If you want a lasting legacy, you must balance profit with repair and regeneration. So decide now, will your resource create short-term gain or long-enduring value? Will your footprint be a scar or a landscaped legacy? Architectural secrets for wealth preservation. You walk a city wall, and your footsteps echo on stone that has kept grain and gold safe for thousands of years. Here is what is really happening. Fortified cities concentrated wealth in places outsiders could not reach. Thick walls and narrow gates slowed attackers and made raids costly. Inside those walls sat treasuries, archives, and workshops. Control the entry, and you control the flow of goods and people. Hidden tombs show another tactic. Pharaohs and emperors built false doors, secret corridors, and sealed chambers. Some had decoys that led thieves away from the true vault. That is early compartmentalization. It is the ancestor of modern vaults and split custody arrangements. Underground cities like those in Cappadocia offer a third lesson. Subterranean complexes provided refuge, storage, and continuity of community in times of crisis. The architecture included ventilation wells and rolling stone doors. Those features kept people and assets alive when the surface world collapsed. For billionaires, the takeaways are simple. First, build physical redundancy. Multiple secure locations beat a single point of failure. Second layer, concealment with legitimacy. Public philanthropy and private storage together confuse simple seizures. Third, use architectural puzzles. Compartmentalize access and require multiple approvals to open the vault. There are two perspectives to weigh. One is defensive, build for survival and secrecy. The other is reputational, build for legacy and public benefit. Which protects value better depends on the risks you see. Ask yourself a final question. Will you hide your treasure in plain sight or bury it where only those you trust can find it? Booby traps and concealment. Imagine a corridor that looks like a passage but ends in a pit. Ancient builders sometimes used traps more as deterrents than murder devices. The goal was delay and confusion. Delay gave defenders time to respond, and confusion made looters leave. Here is what to take away. First, layer your defenses. The ancient trick was multiple obstacles, not one single lock. Modern equivalent is multi-factor access. Physical vaults plus legal barriers and distributed authority make theft harder. Second use, plausible camouflage. Some tombs were hidden under ordinary houses or fields. Today, a storage facility that looks like a warehouse or a vault embedded in a public institution is less likely to be targeted. Legitimacy can act as camouflage. Third use, procedural puzzles. Some ancient tombs required knowledge to open sacred seals. Modern trusts use multi-signature access and staggered permissions, require more than one trusted party to unlock assets, and you reduce insider risk. Perspective matters. A visible fortress deters opportunists. An invisible vault deters targeted attacks. Which do you prefer? Both have costs and benefits. There is a legal layer as well. Ancient societies used rituals and oaths to enforce norms. Today, the law is your ritual. Use contracts, trusts, and international treaties to make assets legally protected and costly to seize. Finally, consider non-physical traps. Reputation audits, insurance, and public philanthropy create social barriers to seizure. A museum that holds your collection makes it politically costly to take. Which strategy do you choose, secrecy or legitimacy? Which will survive tribunals and revolutions and which will not? Symbolism and codes. You run your finger along a carved line, and it feels like a language. That line was chosen to be seen by some people and not by others. Here is what is really happening. The Great Pyramid uses proportions aligned to the stars and to the sun. Those choices were not only religious, they told insiders about cycles and authority. Mayan stelae combine images and glyphs to record lineage victories and sacred dates. Only trained readers could unpack the meaning. That made knowledge exclusive. Archaeologists have found coded inscriptions carved into temples and tombs. Sometimes the code protected information. Sometimes it rewarded those who could read it. For elites, the code was social currency. If you could decode a symbol, you gained access to secrets and to trade. What does this mean for billionaires today? First, use symbolic scarcity. Limited edition provenance and unique marks increase value because they create rarity and trust. Second, design private codes, membership tokens, and encrypted attestation create inside markets where deals close faster. Third, protect knowledge with layered access. Encode sensitive rules in contracts that require special keys so only approved partners can execute them. There are other perspectives. Symbolism can be used for public trust, too. Sacred geometry became public monument and brand at the same time. The same dual use applies now. A public philanthropic symbol can legitimize private networks. Ask yourself a question. Which symbol will you leave behind that proves your story to future historians and customers? Which mark will mean trust instead of secrecy? You have seen the carved lines and the secret marks. Now think about proof and authenticity. Ancient symbols told insiders that an object was genuine. Modern buyers want the same reassurance. First, use provenance as a value multiplier. A labeled origin raises price because it reduces doubt. Auctions and luxury markets pay premiums for traceable history. Build systems that document origin from mine to museum, and you capture more of the value chain. Second, design cryptographic seals. Ancient codes rewarded those who could read. Today, we can embed encrypted attestations in digital ledgers that prove ownership and chain of custody. That makes transfers slick and hard to fake. It also creates an inside market where verified scarcity is worth a premium. Third, leverage public symbols for private trust. A public philanthropic project or a named institute acts like a temple. It signals legitimacy while providing private networks with cover. That dual use can protect assets and reputation at once. There are trade-offs. Symbols can be manipulated, provenance can be forged, Cryptography can be hacked. Public philanthropy can hide undue influence. Archaeology shows both the power and the peril of coded trust. So consider a final practical move. Combine visible legitimacy with invisible verification. Use public marks to build brand value. Use private cryptographic records to secure transfers. Use third-party auditors to make the story believable. Which mark will you design to prove your trust to the world and to your partners? Which code will survive when historians dig through your records? Ancient philosophies on wealth and prosperity. You unroll a papyrus, and the words smell like time. The negatives in the Egyptian Book of the Dead read like a moral checklist. I have not stolen. I have not cheated. Ma'at meant balance, truth, and order. Wealth was a trust, not a prize. Here is what is really happening. Egyptians tied riches to social order. Kings who built temples expected reciprocity. Wealth paid for irrigation granaries and rituals that kept society functioning. The lesson is clear. If wealth is used for public order, it gains legitimacy. Mesopotamian proverbs speak plain. The instructions of Shuruppak warn against greed and counsel fairness in trade. Clay tablets record loans and duties. Laws like Hammurabi made financial rules enforceable. That built reliability in markets. For a modern founder, the takeaway is simple. Rules and predictable enforcement turn private promises into public trust. Confucian texts add a third layer. Ren and Li ask the wealthy to lead with virtue and ritual. Mencius argued that rulers who neglected people lost the mandate of heaven. Power without benevolence is unstable. For billionaires, this points to reputation as capital and to governance as insurance. From these three traditions come three secrets. Stewardship beats hoarding. Institutional giving buys social license. Long-term projects create political insurance. Which of these will you adopt? Will your wealth secure monuments or markets? Will you be remembered as builder or hoarder? The ancients tied money to meaning. They made rules to keep markets honest and rituals to bind elites to duty. Those are not quaint details. They are survival strategies that kept cities stable and economies functioning. So, what are the three usable lessons for modern wealth? Lesson 1. Stewardship. In Egypt, temples redistributed grain and paid workers. Wealth that supports systems wins consent. Modern billionaires who fund hospitals, schools, and water projects build political insurance and social license. That is not charity alone. It is risk management dressed as generosity. Lesson 2. Enforceable rules. Mesopotamia wrote contracts on clay and backed them with law. Predictable enforcement makes trade scalable. For a founder, the equivalent is clear governance, robust compliance, and transparent dispute resolution. Those systems make partnerships possible and reduce costly uncertainty. Lesson 3. Moral signaling. Confucian leaders earned the mandate to rule by visible virtue. Reputation is a form of capital. A public record of ethical behavior builds trust that money cannot buy overnight. Good governance and modesty compound across generations. There are costs and traps. Philanthropy can become a veneer that masks harm. Rules can be crafted to favor insiders. Ritual can be used to exclude. Ancient texts warn about hubris and imbalance. Ask a final question. Do you want to be remembered as the builder who strengthened cities or the hoarder who buried them? Which decision protects your wealth and which protects your name? Archaeological discoveries influencing modern billionaires. You picture a tech founder standing in a lab, peering at a 2,000-year-old shard and thinking about a business model. That image is not fantasy. It is happening. Here is what is really happening. Bill Gates and others fund digitization and multispectral imaging that bring lost texts back to life. Those projects are not sentimental. They create data and algorithms that improve pattern recognition and historical insight. That knowledge is useful in image processing AI and in new kinds of verification systems. Then there is the Antikythera story. That battered gear showed a centuries-old computer. Its rediscovery inspired engineers and designers to think differently about mechanical computation and precision. Modern thinkers draw lessons about modular design and long-term durability. Those lessons influence product design and resilience thinking in high-tech firms. Roman concrete is another direct line. Scientists studying ancient mortars found minerals that form over time and strengthen structures. That research is attracting investment from companies seeking low-carbon, durable materials. A billionaire who funds that research can capture both intellectual property and first-mover advantage in sustainable construction. From these examples come three moves. One, fund research that creates proprietary knowledge while staying public enough to build credibility. Two, own the narrative. Sponsor museums, labs, and publications so your brand is linked to discovery. Three, apply ancient solutions to modern problems. Translate a historical insight into a product or service, and you get technology plus story. What will you fund that others call curiosity and you call advantage? You have seen the ways ancient things shape modern thinking. Now think about doing it yourself. Funding archaeology is not only noble, it can be strategic. First move, fund discovery and data. Billionaires pay for imaging labs, digs, and conservation. That produces datasets. Those datasets improve machine learning and material science. They also give early access to insights no competitor has. Second move, acquire the rights to applications. If research reveals a low-carbon concrete formula, you can fund pilots, license the IP, and control supply. If a pigment technique inspires a new product, you can patent the process and build the brand around authenticity. Third move, build cultural partnerships. Museums, universities, and public projects make your name part of the story. That buys reputation, which converts into social capital. Reputation lowers friction in markets and politics. There are practical steps to execute these moves. 1. Pick a research area that fits your business. 2. Set transparent terms, so host countries and communities share benefits. 3. Publish while protecting commercial pathways, so your work is credible and usable. Now consider risks. Archaeology has a long history of colonialism and looting. Funding can empower local scholars, or it can exploit sites. Legal frameworks vary, and reputational damage travels fast. Ask yourself a final question. Will you be the founder who sponsors a discovery and turns it into shared progress, or the investor who extracts value without repair? Which legacy matters more to you?